You know what time it is? It's time to get in the game with your host, Cynthia J.
Good Tuesday evening, folks. What's going on? It's your
You know what time it is? It's time to get in the game with your host, Cynthia J. You know what time it is? It's time to get in the game with your host, Cynthia J.
Good Tuesday evening, folks. What's going on? It's your girl, your favorite sports show host, Tara J, on your favorite sports show, Get in the Game, and I am excited. If you can tell, you guys know I'm like this every week because talking about sports is my life. But listen, you guys, for the past couple weeks, it's been all football. But we are going to transition and change into a new conversation. And what better person to do that than with the man, not the myth,
Not the myth, no.
but a legend, an ACC legend. And we're going to talk about that. You have your ring on this evening?
I do,
He
yep.
does have his ring on. We might have to get a close-up of that later on. But Mr. Grayson Marshall Jr., and you guys know him here locally and internationally as an author, a speaker, a writer, an entrepreneur, a coach of the coaches. What am I missing?
Father, grandfather.
A father, a
Grandfather.
grandfather. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Owner of so many businesses. If I named them all, it would take up the whole show, but we have so much more to talk to. And actually, we're going to start off in an interesting place. First of all, thank you for joining us this
Thank you
evening.
for having me always.
It is a pleasure to have you here, but we were just having an off-the-field conversation, and so I want to pick that back up because I think a lot of people know you as the author, the motivational speaker, and love you as that.
Thank you.
When you have people such as John Gray and Les Brown speaking of your likeness, who wouldn't be mesmerized by what comes out of your mouth? But
Thank
what
you.
they don't know about you is you're an exceptional basketball player.
I was.
What
That's a
was
good thing.
Okay, so you said was that. So you're not one of those guys who talks about the jumper you used to have.
No. As a matter of fact, I think for me, I always had basketball at a final place. I never lived beyond that. I think the enshrinement in Clemson in 2009, and then being an ACC legend in 2016. I think those were for me kind of reverential acknowledgments of what I believe my career was. But when I was done, I was done. I'm not one that lives back in that space. I was fortunate when I first came here. I played the USBL here for 2 years, and with the Jacksonville Hooters, we won the USBL. Those 2 years I was here under Rex Morgan. So I enjoyed that. But for me, Satara, it was more or less basketball was a way for my parents not to pay for college.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all I saw it as. I think a lot of young kids have aspirations of the grandeur of being a pro athlete. I had a different take on it. I think my parents had always raised me to have plan B, which is completely different from my entrepreneurial mind. But plan B says that you have something to do after the game is over. And oftentimes I looked at the game knowing at the brevity of careers that 2 to 4 years was always going to be anyway, unless you were one of the great ones. So for me, I said, well, why don't I just go get started in the next thing that I was going to do? Not realizing the benefit of the platform, not realizing the upward mobility I would have had from that visible national showcase. So there's a lot of things I didn't know, which is why I'm emphatic about teaching people the right mindset now to go approach and chase after the dreams, because it's not something that I was taught to do. I was taught to think big, but I was never taught to chase my dreams.
Yeah. And if you guys don't notice, he's sitting like on the closest edge of the seat because that That's just the energy you bring. And so much so, you skipped over a few things. Don't forget now, I'm interviewing this evening. So he completely took over. It said he kind of, you went through your accolades so fast. Tell them again what happened in 2009.
So 2009, I was inducted into the Clemson University Hall of Fame.
And that's a big deal because, number one, first of all, we know how big Clemson is in football, but they are also outstanding in basketball.
No.
And so to be an African-American young man and to have that, kind of feat, to be associated with that, what did that mean for you at the time?
It meant a lot. To be honored as one of the great ones that's ever played at that university was something in and of itself. Brian Dawkins,
Right.
NFL Hall of Famer, was in my Hall of Fame class. And the class that we had there was significant. It was well-rounded. But I think that anytime you're recognized for your accomplishments, your commitment, and your lasting impression, I think that's a big thing. Going back to school now, I see young people with their kids, and they'll come up to me, and they'll remind me of when I gave them a wristband when they were young. So it's to see that and to know that those people have still nothing but great memories I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that I left there with a wonderful impression on people, and I've maintained that for this many years.
And where did your love for basketball come from?
I think my love for basketball came in me being kind of an overthinker. I lettered 18 times in high school. And
Say that again.
I lettered
over that fast.
I lettered 18 times in high school.
And what does that mean for people who don't know?
That means that I played enough sports to get a letter in high school.
18 of them.
Now my natural sport was baseball.
Okay.
And that's what my grandfather really wanted me to play. He thought I was the most natural at that. I chose basketball because I would know whether I was going or not. Baseball, I could have been in minor leagues for God knows how many years. And in football, you can probably get a red shirt a year, 5-6 years. I mean, so many things going. Basketball, I knew 4 years I was going to have an answer when it was done.
Right.
I was going to figure it out. So that's when I grabbed it. And I think from a X's and O's standpoint, I thought the game. So I was always very cerebral, which made me a little bit more valuable on the team. Being a coach on the floor, it's kind of transitioned into my life as a moniker that I have. But I was able to see and read defenses before. I was just very, very cerebral. So being on the floor, being on the court, being an extension of the bench made the coach's job easier, made the players more comfortable. And that's kind of walked me into my lifelong passion, which is helping people, assisting them, and helping them become everything they want to become in life.
Thank you for walking me into my next question, because you said the word. This is what makes a great interview, folks. You're learning something from the both of us. So assist, because you were at one point the all-time leader
Correct.
in assists at Clemson. At one point, 20 assists, and so that transferred over into your life after because of your passion for assisting.
Right. So I had against Maryland Eastern Shore, they recorded me having 20 assists. And what they found was that they gypped me out of 2.
Uh-oh.
So the 22 I would have would be the national record for assists in a game, because it's 21. Mark Wade and somebody else had 21, but I actually had 22 that night. When I graduated, I was the all-time ACC career assist leader. I had 857. I still hold every assist record in Clemson history. So those are things, and it was funny when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, one of the comments made by the sports information director, Tim Beret, was that he led with this. He says, they say that records will never be broken, but Grayson Marshall's 857 assists is probably a record that will never be broken, because we've had great point guards come through there. And I think the closest person to me is 475.
Wow.
And I get 857. So, and nowadays, if somebody's good enough, they're not staying 4 years anyway.
Right.
So I think that that's going to be one that will be there for a good long while. And I can always go back in the annals and look back and say, I'm still that guy.
Now, excuse me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm looking over some of your stuff, and I couldn't help but notice you had the little tongue hanging out, which we know that, when people see that, or at least when I saw it, I automatically thought of Michael Jordan.
No.
And we were talking about The Last Dance earlier, but did he play any role on your passion for the game?
No, because Michael, it was funny, when I went to Clemson on my recruiting trip, that was Michael's actual last game. So his last ACC game was against Clemson at Little John Coliseum. So I actually watched him play his last ACC regular season game at Littlejohn.
Yeah. When you watched him, did you, being the analytical person and cerebral person that you were, did you see something in him?
I think I saw something in him when they beat Georgetown.
Okay.
And because I'm from D.C., so John Thompson and his son were great friends of mine. I spent a lot of time at the Thompson house. So we, growing up in D.C., had a love for Georgetown basketball. And to see the Hoyas go and to have played Summer League with all those guys, when Michael hit that shot in 82, it was just like, and I think everybody put him on, I mean, he put himself on notice at that point. A freshman, no hesitation, 18 feet on the weak side on a ball reversal, that he didn't hesitate. I think everybody who's anybody kind of can remember where they were when they watched certain things. And that was one of those things you can remember, that shot. You know what you thought when it was there. And the rest is obviously history.
And I mean, so let's be honest, that could have been you so easily because we were having the conversation about your former teammate Horace and how you're looking forward to episode number 5, and we won't spill the beans about that, but that could have been you playing with Mike. So do you ever look back on your career and feel like, man, I should have kept going, or why didn't I? Did you have any what-if moments?
I did have what-if moments, and it wasn't because I had them. Being that Horace was a first-round draft pick, Chicago was there all the time. So had I pursued it, I had all those opportunities if I wanted them. I don't think I had a what-if moment until I went back to D.C. And a lot of guys that I grew up with would give me mess for not having played. I mean, they were now, but John Crotty and some more guys that ended up playing in the league, they would look at me and they would be like, gee, look, dude making your money. And it wasn't until I really looked at that I even, and they would give me a hard time about it, in love, but at the same time they looked at me like, bro, you were there. We didn't even have that chance. They would have killed for it, and I was sitting there as the all-time ACC career assist leader. I'm doing everything that everybody wants, and I didn't pursue it. So I had those at times, and there were times going forward in life that, again, if I'd have known the platform and what the stage could have really brought me, I would have done it just for that. No, but I never looked down the road, because Plan B doesn't teach you to look down the road. Again, that's not vision chasing. Plan B teaches you to become comfortable, get into a groove, and stay in that, and that's not ever who I was. So it was a conflict in my whole spirit the whole time.
Yeah, and before we get into your Plan B, when you look back on that, what about that avenue, was it something that didn't like appease your taste? What about it made you say, I'm going to stick with my Plan B and go another way?
When I was little, I used to watch soap operas.
Okay.
And I would watch Young and the Restless and All My Children.
Okay.
And I would watch those. And what I loved about it was the way that they did business, even though it was television. I liked the suits. I liked running companies. I liked being in charge, being in control. Those were things that I liked, and that's what I really wanted. But I had nobody around me that was doing that. I grew up in a magnificent family, middle-class American D.C. My mother's a principal. My dad was a teacher.
Yeah.
My sister's currently the head of online education for the Department of Defense. So I grew up in a family of educated folks. But that's what they were going to be. They were going to be lifers at that. And I would sit there and dream, I want to own a business. I want to own a company. I want to fly in jets. I mean, that's the thing I wanted, but I couldn't talk to anybody about it. So I kept all that inside the whole time. When I got done playing ball and I wanted to pursue that, I didn't have a coach. So I made a lot of business mistakes because I didn't have anybody to teach me, which is why it's so important for me to spend the time talking about what that transition is after sports, what it's like, what you need to know, what they're not going to teach you, how your skill set transfers, how there's no way in my perception that an athlete that excels should ever be struggling out here in the world. And so that's what's important to me. So I think being indoctrinated into Plan B and fighting it, not knowing how to do the thing I wanted, was the biggest complexing thing that I ever had to face. And I had to kind of figure that out on my own.
Now, you said something that I need to go back to because this kind of shocks me. You said you had no one to talk to about what you wanted to do. Why was that?
Well, I think that nobody wanted to, I never knew anybody who wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never heard the word before. You know, it was nothing that I never heard. Nobody around me owned a small business. I mean, I had an uncle growing up owned a liquor store, but I didn't have anybody who was a business person. You know, so I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. And oftentimes, when you're the only one in a room, you feel shameful for even thinking that way. You get really, really reserved and thinking, why am I thinking like this and nobody else is? You know, the individuality that comes with being an entrepreneur and a small business owner is a characteristic that you have to have, but it's also a flaw to most people. So if you don't really know who you are, if your mindset isn't a certain way, you're going to run into obstacles, and then you're going to run into I told you so's. And no entrepreneur that's in their mind wants to hear, I told you so. You'd rather be around people that say, okay, well, you messed that one up, do it again. And when I look at sports and I look at the world that we live in, we're the only world that pays for failure. So when you look at baseball players get out 7 out of 10 times. They get paid millions and millions of dollars to get out twice as much than they get hits. Basketball players get paid to miss more shots than they make. They miss 60% of their shots, they make 40. So we're the only country that pays for failure. And we're not taught that because school teaches you that failure is bad. So if you have a mindset that failure is bad, the one thing you don't want to do is fail.
Especially in front of people.
Correct. Well, here's the reality. The only access door to success is through failure. So basically, we've been programmed and taught how not to succeed. And that becomes the quintessential challenge that most of us have. That's why we have to be retrained. You know, we have to understand, even from a biblical standpoint, you can't pour new wine in old wineskins.
At all.
And that's what we tend to do and wonder why we can't get to that next level. It's because of those conditionings. Mark 7:13 says the tradition of man makes the word of God of none effect.
No effect.
So we don't have the traditions, practices, habits, behaviors that we've learned from a social standpoint, from an educational standpoint. They may have some merit and value because that's how I quantify my level of success, but they do you no good when you're pursuing that thing you want to pursue. And so I had to learn that the hard way, but again, failure pays.
And let's state the obvious, you're an African-American male, grew up in D.C., and even though you did have a sheltered, supported home life, not like most that probably grew up during that time when you're kind of in the hood and raised by a single parent, you do go off to Clemson. And you go off to Clemson with a full ride, with the possible potential to play professionally at any point in time, even when you were thinking about, I'm still going to be an entrepreneur. Were there moments of adversity where people looked at you like, or you felt like, I don't see any men that look like me doing this. Maybe I should go the other route.
You know what? I don't ever think I thought about it that way. And I think it's because being raised in a quasi-multicultural world in D.C., I was never overwhelmed by being a minority. My mother taught me never to use that as a crutch. It's not easy as an African American, and you got to do it better. So I was always taught I had to be smarter. I was always taught I had to be faster. I was always taught I had to be better. Now, I never asked, was that fair, or why it wasn't fair. I was just taught that this is the way you do it. So be more articulate, be smarter, be more aware. So that levels the playing field. I think people now want to ask, why is that the case? I don't ask why it's the case. It's what it's what I need to do. That's what I'm doing. And I've always taken that approach. So I think I always had role models, and not specific mentors that I wanted to be, but people that I saw doing. And I think as long as I saw people achieving at a level, then I knew that it was possible. I think the one thing that I never thought was possible, I never thought I would see in my lifetime, was an African American president. So regardless of political affiliation, my respect for that happening was, okay, the one thing that I never thought could happen has happened, so ain't nothing. Everything's possible. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to understand. We make excuses because people tolerate them. Excuses are the babysit of non-productivity. Excuses are the nails used to build a house of failure. I don't want to build that house. Even though failure is on the way, I don't want that to be my house. Because failure in your past is a reference, not a residence. You're not supposed to live there. And I think that those things become the reasoning for me. So I never looked at it in that way. I looked at it as, if someone can do it, and I share this when I speak, if it's been done by anybody, you got no excuse.
Right.
I don't care what your adversity, I don't care what your situation was. If somebody who has your background has done it, then it's doable. Single parent home, alcoholic, if somebody came out of that and made something of themselves, you got no excuse. And I think that's why it's important for us to Revelation 12 and 2, overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. People have to know who you are and what you've been through. And you need to be vulnerable and transparent with it. Because they need to know, oh my God, you made it through that? You don't even look like that. And that's the beautiful part about coming out of things successful. Nobody would know I was homeless at 29 years old. I mean, all those things are part of my life. Nobody would know that. Nobody would know that I couldn't go home after Monday night because I knew the lights were out. So I wouldn't go home until midnight so I could just get into bed and go to sleep because I couldn't pay everything until Friday. I went through those days. I went through 3 and 4 days of not eating. You don't look like that, so they don't think it's there. And that's why it's important for you to tell your story. And I think one of the things with ESPN 30 for 30, the one thing I loved about those stories, or when I look at Unsung on BET, I see the stories, and you see what these folks actually went through. And all we see is what they want us to see. But I love seeing the backdrop because that tells me why the character is built, why the intestinal fortitude was there, why they moved and kept going beyond, because this is what they had to face, this is what they had to go and make happen because of what they had been through.
So obviously there was a point after basketball at Clemson where you made the decision, continued in the decision. So what was the next step?
I went back home to D.C. Mama's house, mama's rules. That wasn't going to work. So I left D.C. and a good friend of mine who was a tennis player at Clemson was living down here in Ponte Vedra. I called him up on the phone one day and said, hey, B, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm just living down here, no rent, no roommate. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. And so I came down here. He went back on a satellite tour, again, to go back and play tennis. So I ended up staying here and just getting to know people and really wanting to do business. So I started working with kids because that was simple. And then I got in, my first business deal was getting into C-band satellites. The big white satellites you used to have out there in the field. So before they could get cable into those areas, we would go out and sell those big satellites. Well, we got in that business 6 months before DirecTV came out. So that was not the best deal in the world. So we lost all that money doing that. So I then I was introduced to the Amway Corporation. I never got involved in it, but the one thing the Amway Corporation taught me to do was read differently. So I began to listen to tapes. I began to read. I began to listen to people thinking a different way. Counterintuitive to what I'd always learned, but it made sense to me. So all of what I'd been looking for now was resonating with me. I still had nobody to talk to about it, but at least I saw people doing it. So I started reading, kept reading, book after book after book after book after book. Never got involved with the Amway Corporation just because at the time I was a single guy and they had product pick up in the garage. I ain't had no garage, and I ain't know nobody who could, all my friends could one roll of toilet paper last them a month. So it was just not something I could do, but I believed in the industry. So I began to do that, and the more I opened my eyes to it, the more I began to just continue and study and just wait for that opportunity. In 2005, I got it, and took that opportunity and ran with it and changed my life.
And that opportunity was?
It's a company called Monavie.
Okay.
Monavie was a functional beverage. At that time, there was a thing called Noni Juice. There was Zango. So functional beverages were the thing. So Monavie was a product that came out in a wine bottle that was overpriced. It was $40 a freaking bottle. But I believed in antioxidants, so I had begun to eat healthy. So now...
Wait, you begun to eat healthy. So all that time at Clemson, while you're playing ball, you weren't healthy then?
Oh, no. We had a training table.
Yeah.
We had a training table. I ate
training tables are supposed to be healthy.
No, we ate with William the Refrigerator Perry. No, there's no... Now, we had the opportunity to eat what... We had the opportunity to eat what we wanted. Now, when I say healthy, I didn't understand what truly would go in my body.
Okay.
So, they fed us good, but when I look back now, I wouldn't even have that stuff.
Now, were you the athlete who left the game and then never worked out again? Or
No.
did you stay on a regimen?
Well, I switched because when I stopped playing basketball, baseball always been my first love. So when I moved to Florida, I started playing softball 6-7 nights, almost 7 nights a week. So I was always doing something. I never stopped doing anything. Now I play golf all the time. I will not pick up a basketball unless it's for a celebrity game that nobody can foul anybody. I'm not playing because I'm still too competitive.
Yeah.
And I know me. So the minute you start running your mouth, see, I'm still 80s old school. I'm still bad boys. I'll elbow you in the mouth.
Yeah.
You know. And so for me, when I was a coach, I literally had to make sure that my testimony was right with my kids. So my kids I played for never heard me cuss. I made sure that I didn't do anything in front of them that would mess up my relationship with them. So all those things were important to me. But when it came down to, you know, who I was, Montevideo kind of lined up with everything I was doing. So it was a mixture of, it would give you the equivalent of 13 fruits and vegetables. So it had pomegranate, bilberry, passion fruit, wolfberry, blueberry, kiwi, cranberry, apricot, prune, apple, aronia, pear, acerola, banana, and dark and white pigment grapes.
Did y'all get all that?
So that's what was in the product. And so I was the only African American Blue Diamond in the company, and we did extremely well. So I took that money, parlayed into franchises, and have turned that into business after business since. But that's what I did. So I got laid off from ministry that August of 2004, and I said I'll never work for anybody else again in my life. I was at ministry at a church, and I loved the Potter's House. I was there, but they went in a different direction, so my time there ended, and I said I'll never work for anybody again. So that's when I got into it, and from that point on in 2005, I've just been a business guy ever since.
So on your website, there's a quote that says, "The guy that gets you to believe in you."
Mm-hmm.
That's you.
Yes, no doubt.
How do you do that?
I think when people become motivational, it's about them motivating you on their terms. When people come to see somebody speak, they're there to see that person, their influence, their direction, their accomplishments. For me, I'm about you. So when I deal with you, let's do what you want to do. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to become? I got to get you to believe in you. If I believe in you, that's great. We're not going anywhere unless you believe in you. And so building people's self-esteem through their own personal why statement, developing things in them that make them say, yes, I can do this. And it doesn't matter what area of life it's in. I give them some basics so they can understand, here's what has to be established before you can go anywhere. But I can get you to believe in you. John 14:12 says, "There's greater works than these shall you do, because I go to be with my Father." And that verse of scripture is the one that I stand on when I'm doing this type of teaching. If Jesus can say to people, I expect you to do more than I did, that's a tall order. Because we all know what he did, those of you all that believe like we believe. That's a tall order. So I'm no good of a leader if I don't teach you to be better than me. And I think what happens in the world today is we don't want to give all of what we know to people because we don't want them to pass us. So truthfully, people that appear to be faith-based operate in scarcity. And scarcity is fear-based. So I question where their real faith lies. Because if you don't think there's enough for you, you can't tell me that your Father is Jehovah Jireh. He's El Shaddai, the all-sufficient one, the all-breasted one. You can't tell me that and then not tell me everything you know. Because you're worried about me getting yours. Well, there's enough, isn't there? And so all those things become things that are diametrically opposed when you speak them. So for me, I got to get you to believe in you. So we have to define you. Most people have not learned to love who they are. They don't know who they are. They know who they've been taught to be. They know who people have said they should be. Here's what your talent is, go do this. Here's what you're good at, go do this. Well, no, I don't want to know that. I want to know what you want to do, because the Bible says your gift will make room for you and put you before great men. So let's define that. Let's get to what your gift is. People don't understand that they can monetize their gift. You can't monetize what you don't identify. So we take the time to identify what that is. And no matter what it is, you can monetize it.
Did y'all get all that? And I hear somebody right now say, Satara, can you please pass the offering plate? I don't have one, but I'm sure you can cash app it, or you can cash app the show. But, okay, so let's get into how you do that, because obviously, and I'm saying obviously because I've seen you do it, but for those who don't know, I mean, you speak to so many different types of groups. You have the purse team, you have the football team, you have the coach of coaches. So how are you able to spread yourself in that way to be who you need to be for each individual entity?
I don't think there's any difference. And I think what people, they try to adapt to the audience. That's what I mean. As opposed to letting the audience adapt to what's there. They try to Okay, this audience I'm going to say this. This audience I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. As a sports person, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. Here's what we don't do. We want to get creative and innovative and don't want to work on the fundamentals. If you get real good at the fundamentals, all the rest of it doesn't matter. We tend to not look at the fundamentals and try to do the next great trendy thing, and we miss the fundamentals. For me, I want to get back to the fundamentals. Vince Lombardi used to do this at football whenever there was a new season. He would walk out to the new team and say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." That's where he would start.
Yeah.
And I've been playing on it. He didn't care.
Do that one
He
more
said,
time.
"Gentlemen, this is a football." That's what he would do. And they would almost look at it, but he had to make sure that he covered everything. Because what happens is if I assume you know something and you don't, then I've missed something as a coach. When I first started coaching here locally, I had some older kids in the ministry that were already playing at other high schools. And they would come into the gym, and they had made all conference and everything at the schools they were in. And so I would ask them questions. I would say, "Well, you don't know nothing about the game." "Well, coach, I know everything." "Okay, good. How long is the basketball court?" How wide is it?" "I don't know." I said, "How far is the free throw line from the basket?" I said, "Wait a minute. You're telling me you love the game and you're good at it, yet you don't know anything about it. Where'd the game start? Who started it? Who's the first African-American team? The Harlem Renaissance." When you go, if you care about something, you begin to know the history of it. You take a full-blown commitment and conscious pursuit of it. They were just playing it. So when I finally got them into the game, they were like, "Coach, we don't know none of this." And they've been playing for so many years because people skip over it. They may look at your talent and say, "Well, let me play the talent as opposed to develop the person." And for me, it's about developing the person. So when it comes down to the audience, I can take the simple keys and I can make them fit any audience. Because if I can get you to do this, then it wins. Basketball is real simple. It's still pick and roll. I don't care what else you draw up there. It's still pick and roll. I don't care how complicated you make it. It could be the triangle offense. It could be San Antonio. It could be Golden State. It doesn't matter. It's still pick and roll. You still got to come off the pick. You still got to make somebody pick you up and find an open man. It's still ball reversal. There's some things that are never going to go away. I don't care if you want to add a stretch forward and move it. All of those things become nuances that become nouveau in the new game. The game is still simple. Football's still blocking and tackling. I don't care what you want to do. You five wide, do whatever you want. If you don't block, if you don't tackle, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And those are things that I think we get away from. You know, he's Preston, who's sitting here as a former pro football player, and technique is a big thing. You know, footwork and hips and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that sounds good, but we get in all this, and now we look at training and all those things, and now all of a sudden you got to use this machine and that machine, and this machine work better. Go back down. I'm gonna look at Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker ain't doing no push-ups and sit-ups. And y'all can look at that man right now.
And he did yoga.
Yoga and ballet. And
Yes.
but I'm saying, none of those things would translate into these new fangled machines that we're getting on.
Right.
And still, he looks younger than he has been in any time right now, doing a little stuff. And I think we try so much to be so innovative that we get away from the simple stuff. Here's what we have to do. Here's what you weren't taught. Here's why it's hard to go back. Here's why your mind is the way it is. Here's why you think the way you do. I'm called a metacognition maven, and for this reason. Metacognition, by definition, means the understanding and awareness of how you think. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So if I can get you to get to those areas and realize that the decision you're making because of the way you're thinking, and if you change the way you think, you change decisions, we're getting into some simple stuff.
Now, how much of this, because I don't know if it's the way that other athletes view other athletes, but how much of how you coach, how you do business, do you think comes from organized sports?
Almost all of it.
Almost all.
Almost all of it. But I don't implement it in the same way. You never hear me cuss from the stage. And that was part of an accepted ritual as a player. You know, the coach gonna cuss you out. You know, that's just where it was. So I'll never do that. But I think what I was able to do is I was able to look at why the transition is so tough. Statistics show, and these are NFL statistics, that 90% of pro football players, 2 years removed from the sport, have been through a bankruptcy, divorce, or they're in prison. That's their statistics. Now, what shocks me is these are your statistics. You know it, and you're not doing anything about it. So what I've been able, I had to look and say, okay, why is that the case? Well, first thing I figured out was, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt. And when you say your statistics, he's referring to the NFL.
Correct.
He's talking to the NFL So I just
Correct.
wanted to put that
And
in there.
and that's what they put out. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
at the end of the day, I had to figure out, okay, so what is it? Well, I began to look at it. It's a business. You guys are high-paid employees. You're no better than a W-2 employee out here. But what happens is that because your money puts you in the top 1% of wage earners in the world, you think you're an entrepreneur. You think you're a business person, which is why most of y'all get taken, because you're not equipped. You haven't studied that business. You know, Mark Brunell's a good friend of mine, and Mark has some financial challenges here in business. And one of the things I talked to him about, he said to me, he said, Grace, I wish I'd have met you 20 years earlier. And one of the things I said to him, Mark, was if you're going to get into a franchise, before you buy one, go work at one. They bought Whataburger and they took a hit on Whataburger. But here's what I suggest. Go work at a Whataburger for one summer and learn about food costs. Learn about employees, how they work, and see if that's really what you want to see if that's really what you want to do from a business standpoint.
Right.
Sharon Wright, who's a good friend of mine, we're going up in June to do a charity golf tournament. He just had his leg amputated. Sharon was a first-round draft pick, but he called me 2 years ago, and he said he called me Big Little Bruh, and because he's 6'10", and he was telling me about things he was going through, and he said his business venture was opening up barbershops. Well, he was playing overseas. He said, bro, I was losing money. I said, let me talk to you. You open a cash business and you across the water? You can't monitor that.
Yeah.
But they didn't think about it. He said, because when I'm home, of course, they can't rob you while you're sitting there. But you dealing with a cash business overseas. All these guys want to open up nightclubs. They want to open up strip joints. They want to open up all these things. Do you not understand it's not a viable business? Your bartenders are going to beat you out of half your money because they're going to overpour and keep it. It's a cash business that you can't track any of it. And you run the risk of violation day after day after day. You run sexual harassment potential, everything. Why would you put yourself in those positions? But they don't think that way. It's the life that they live as an athlete. So they still want to live that way. They don't take the right approach, and this isn't all of them, because you got guys like Ray Allen and some more of these guys that do very well. Ray negotiated his own contract. So you got some, but they're the true minority.
Right. Why do you think, and guys who are watching, we're going to go over in time. It's okay. You can still sit and watch it, and we'll probably have to bring you back for a part 2. But why do you think, because people are watching you right now, and I can hear my listeners saying, why was it so easy for you to transition, and it's so hard, especially for our sons and our brothers and our husbands? Why is it so difficult for the others to transition?
Don't get it twisted. It wasn't easy. But I think what I was willing to learn is what I talk to athletes about now. I talk to them about what you have to learn.
What you were willing to learn.
Correct.
So
correct.
The first step, they have to be willing.
Correct. Because they still want to live that life. They still want to wear that jersey. They still don't understand that.
Does ego play a role in that?
All day
too?
long.
Okay.
But I think it's more fear, and this is what I've come to understand. It's less ego and it's more fear. They don't know how to transition or transfer their skill set. Because up until now, 4-3 meant something. Running 4-3-40 don't mean nothing out there. Bench pressing 225 30 times means something on the football field. It doesn't mean anything now. So everything that validated you as an individual has no merit anymore. And especially if you weren't a marquee person, you're easily forgotten with the next thing. So they don't want that to go. They want to live that life as long as they can, not realizing they never created a monetary way for that to give them some value.
So we just had a draft, and we had a draft prospect here on the show, and I know you know a lot of rookies, and sometimes you go and you'll speak to the rookie class. What is one thing that you give them that would not only work for the professional athlete, but will work for the person who's saying, I am drowning in debt, I do not know what to do with my money? What is one key that you use to speak to people concerning finances?
I'll say it 2 ways. One thing is you can't fix your current problem, you can only fix it going forward. We spend more time looking backwards than going forward. What you created is going to be there. You can't fix it looking backwards. Nobody drives looking in the rearview mirror. We drive looking forward. You glance at the rearview mirror, but you don't drive that way. You're going to crash into what's ahead. But what I talk to athletes about is I talk to them about understanding their contract. Their rookie deal is going to be 3 years. So here's what I usually suggest to them when I talk to them. Who are 2 dudes you can live with? Find two dudes you can live with. Find two dudes you live with. Go get you a nice condo for $2,000 a month. Get one on the beach, $2,000 a month. 3 nice rooms. Y'all ain't never there anyway. Find two dudes you can live with. Buy whatever car you want. But take the first year and take every one of your paychecks, a portion of it, and buy property. Buy cash flowing property in those first 3 years. If this is the city you're going to be in those first 3 years, you now have 6 to 12 properties that are cash flowing for you. You now sign your big deal, and you live off your cash flow. The signing bonus that you get in that 3rd year, buy the house you want. I got no bills. You already own the car. Live off the cash flow and stack your checks. You never have to worry about it. There's not an NFL player, NBA player, Major League Baseball player in this era that should ever sign a contract and never have to work again. Ever. Ever have to work again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Marshawn Lynch still ain't cashed a game check yet. Shaquille O'Neal has still never cashed a game check. They took a different approach. They took the long-term approach. They took the disciplined approach. And I think that's what people have to understand. Instant gratification becomes such a novelty in the world. And here's what I'm reminded of when I talk to them. Most of them came from nothing, so they don't mind going back to it. That's the biggest thing. They look at it as a dream come true. And they're going to live it as if it can never happen again. So, hey, I lived it, I did it, and they'll go back and talk at it, just like Randy Moss's boys did on the corner on the store. All of them just sitting there talking about what could have been, Rain University. So those are the big things that I talk to them about is really understanding what you actually have from this platform. Because each of them in this city, there's no reason they shouldn't have 4 or 5 sponsors. You should go out and look for a car dealership and let them pay for your car. You should go look for a restaurant. You should go look for a clothier. All these things are things that you should be looking for, making yourself marketable. But I got to be honest with you, when you come and you got your hair everywhere, you can't be the spokesperson for half the thing. I'm sorry. You still have to understand mainstream opinion.
Right.
And it's not until you get to that echelon where you can just look a fool and do what you want to do.
Right. And you're saying, the thing that I appreciate with that you're saying, I'm trying not to laugh at what
I'm going to keep it 100.
But the thing that you're saying that I appreciate, and it's one thing that I remind my brother, is you're the entity.
No question.
So when you say you go out and do it, somebody just said, well, that's what he has an assistant for, and that's what he has an agent for, and that's why he has this marketing person. You're shaking your head now.
Let me tell you, David Falk was Michael Jordan's agent. David Falk also represented Sharon Wright. Sharon told me the minute he got hurt, David Falk's number was disconnected. Couldn't get David Falk on the phone for nothing.
And not because Sharon's phone wasn't working.
Correct. Couldn't get him. And again, you have to realize that's who you are to them. You're just
a number.
That's it.
Yeah.
You're an employee. That's who you are to them.
Yeah. So, wow, this is good. So for all the people who are people are probably trying to take notes right now. That's why you can go back and watch the show. But let's talk about your books, because I feel like for those people who are having a hard time kind of processing those things you're saying, you went ahead and put them in a series of books. So talk about your first book, and then on to the one we have here, which is your baby, because you just finished doing the cover.
Yep.
Yeah.
We just redid the cover. T.C. Bradley called me up one day, and he wants me to be on this show called God Made Millionaire. And he said, Grace, I was looking at your books, and where are you? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, where are you? And I go, TC, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, you have an amazing smile, you got a great personality, how come you're not on the cover of your books? He said, all best-selling authors are on the cover of their books. So we just redid them all to put me on the front of it. It was nothing I ever thought about before. I literally, because of who I am, I wanted to downplay who I was. It took me a long time to really understand what the value was in marketing me.
No way.
It was because.
But you can teach that to
all day
other
long.
people.
All day long. All day long. It's just like the best coaches in the world weren't the greatest players. Phil Jackson was a decent player. He wasn't a great player. The great coaches, Bill Belichick. The great coaches, there's something about your ability to convey that. And that's what it comes down to. In 1972, in D.C. was the first time I experienced racism. I moved from 305 U Street in the hood to 1884 Iverson Street, which is a mile and 10th outside the southeast side.
And you were how old then?
I was 6. I was actually going to be 6 that November, so I was 5 when we actually moved. And we moved to Kilo Better. But to me, really embracing who I was, so one of the things I talk about now is the value of who you are. It took me a long time to get that. And being involved in narcissistic relationships didn't help. So they kept me in a reserved space, not able to move forward. So when I did the books, the first book I did was, I did 2 books early on. That was called The Game Matters, and that was a compilation book I did with Phil Fulmer, Steve Garvey, and the aforementioned Bruce Jenner when he was Bruce. I did that book with them. And then I did a book called Dad's Unfinished Business, A Father's Story of Son's Quest for Change. And that had everything to do with my dad and me. My dad was probably the smartest guy, book smart I ever knew. Was very simple and conservative, but was book smart. But I don't think my dad ever tapped into the depth of who he could be mentally. My dad could have run whatever company he wanted to, but that just wasn't who he was. And I remember preaching my dad's sermon. And I remember feeling like Elisha when Elijah got called up. And I felt like at that point, there was a new level of intellect bestowed on me. There was a new ideology about who I was, and I wanted to finish my dad's business. And so that kind of took me there. So the next book I did was Do Positive, Just Because, The Keys to the Life You've Always Imagined. And I did that book, and I focused on the 5 keys. And 5 is a biblical number of grace. So I looked at those 5 keys, and that's probably if somebody wants to shift the way that they think, that's the book initially.
Say the name of the book again.
Do Positive, Just Because, The Keys to the Life You've Always Imagined. It comes from 1 John 4:18, where it says, perfect love cast out all fear. What's perfect love? We all know as agape love, unconditional love. So I took 5 keys, 5 is number of grace. The first key is own where you are today.
No, don't give it to
Oh, okay.
them.
Well, y'all gotta look at the book.
You gotta buy the book.
Yes, get the book.
This
Go to
is
Amazon,
where
go to my
I
website.
step in and say,
I'm sorry.
no, we're moving on.
You got
Okay, next book was.
So what I did, so the next book was Maintaining Greatness, that Les Brown did the forward for.
Okay.
And that
Who
book
is a good friend of yours who you
Correct.
traveled with. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's my guy.
Yeah.
And that book came out of me speaking at Clemson University at the Entrepreneurial School.
Okay.
They called me up and I did 4 sessions there. And the last session that I did for one of the classes, one of the young men asked me, he said, Mr. Marshall, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. He said, what does it take to become great?
Wow.
And I said, well, that's a tough question for me. I said, because you were born great. Genesis 1:26 says you were born in the image and likeness of God. So in my opinion, you were born great. I said, where people struggle with is understanding how to maintain that.
Is this in the book?
Yeah. That's
We're
in the
not
book.
giving it to him.
But
okay.
that's in it. So
Move
how to
on to
maintain
the next
greatness.
book.
So this is my newest
Go
book here.
get the book.
This is my newest book here, your second half.
Yes.
Um,
Love this.
and that book, so what I did was I took the keys. I always wanted to do like a chicken soup for the soul. So I didn't want to follow that way, but this book is almost a sports version of Do Positive. So there's 5 keys in that book that go specifically towards athletes that are in the same vertical. However, I deal with them from sports analogies and sports vernacular. Anybody can read that book because it's just sports analogies, but the athlete will get a deeper meaning out of it because I'm talking about athletes. They'll relate to the conversation. I'll give you just the first key. The first key is
Just the first.
study the film because the eye in the sky doesn't lie. So when we, as athletes, could have a good game. You could have a game where you think you did it all, everything is wonderful, the papers are there, you getting interviewed, go hit that film room. Coach will let you know that, bro, you didn't do a darn thing in that game. You missed here, you missed here, you missed here. And I think that is the accountability that you have to go to the next level. So athletes understand that. However, they don't want to be accountable for anything. So the things that got you to the apex of sports, you do. If you'll just start taking that stuff out here, you're already doing everything it takes. They just don't know how well their skill set can transfer, and that's what I show them in the books.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about that anymore
No, we're
because
done
you're going
anymore.
to go get the book.
Correct.
So you have so much coming up. I at least want you to kind of give our audience an idea of
Okay.
where they can find you, how they can follow you. And speaking of, you and I talked earlier, we're not concerned about COVID, but has COVID in any way, shape, or form affected your businesses?
It's affected my business only because the economy that I cater to in marketing was shut of no volition of those people. So it did affect it. But again, if you truly understand Ecclesiastes 11:2, where it says we should have 7 to 8 streams of income, if you really understand that and that's what you apply in your life, it's 4 times like this. And that's exactly what it's for. So I think the bigger thing, Satara, is that what it really showed me was how much fear is still in the world, how much manipulation is still evident, and it shows me how much room we still have to grow. So for me, it was a resonating reminder of why I do what I do. My job is to bring information. Amateurs convince people, professionals sort them out. Because a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You can't change people. So for me, it's an opportunity to bring information. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm going to just lay it out there. I believe that the world belongs to them that are willing to change their mind when the facts have been presented. So let's look at it this way. You don't want to believe something. You don't want to look at it because it's going to cause you to have to change. It's going to cause you to maybe have to redefine who you are, what you believe in. But it's my job to challenge you that way. And that's why I'm a coach. A true coach interferes in the lives of other people to get them where they say they want to go. I'm not here for you to like me. I'm here to get you where you want to go. And true coaches, true teachers, true influential people, if they really love you, they're not going to let you get away with stuff. They're going to hold you accountable. And it may hurt for a minute. You may feel some sort of way and be in your feelings for a second. But further down the road, you'll appreciate, you know what? I'm glad that happened. You know what?
So do me a favor and hold our viewers accountable to something, because I love what you just said. They know what kind of show this is, but you have an opportunity, we have an opportunity to hear you hold them accountable to something.
I think the biggest thing I want people to hold themselves accountable to is what you truly believe in. It doesn't matter to me what you believe. Stay true to it. The Bible talks in James 1:5. It says, if any man has doubt, he should not expect anything from God. It goes on 2 verses later, it talked about a double-minded man will be unstable in all his ways. I think I'd rather see people take a stance. Now, is it challenging? Of course it is, because you have adopted certain ideologies based on what you believe to be true. African Americans predominantly are Democrat. When you look at the history of the Democratic Party, the Democrats were the one that wanted slavery. I don't understand it. Christians are by nature, quote-unquote, Republican. But at the same time, I have Democratic Christians that are for abortion, but Christianity says, so again, I don't care where you stand, just stand somewhere consistently.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing I want people to come together. Get some more information. The Bible says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You've got to go and figure out what truth is. You can't group think anymore. You got to you think. And I want people to get to a place where you start having a thought for yourself. I just believe that if you give people the right information, they can make an intelligent decision. I believe that in people.
That's going to be his next book, so I'm not going to let him. I'm going to be his publicist right now and play on that, because he just wrote another book. So instead, as we close up, tell people how to follow you, how do they get in touch with you?
All right, GraysonMarshallJr.com is my website. Grayson Marshall with 2 L's, JR.com. I'm on TikTok, The Real GM. Y'all follow me on TikTok. I'm on TikTok, The Real GM. Oh my God. Look, again, I have to, here's what I believe. If Shaquille and Kevin Hart can be on TikTok, if J-Lo and A-Rod can be on TikTok, then you need to be where, there's a reason that they're there. There's a reason. So you kind of have to model what other folks are doing. And I don't care what they tell me it's for. If they're there, then I need to have a presence there as well. On Instagram, The Real GM as well. Facebook, Grayson Marshall. Twitter, at GMarshallJR10, I think. Yeah, at GMarshallJR10.
But if you go to his website,
you can get to all of them.
All
Correct.
of the social media
Correct.
platforms. Will you come back again?
Of course.
Yeah, he will.
I get a chance to talk, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm good. Yes.
And I get a chance to be your publicist
You got it. It's all
and
good.
your interviewer and the reporter. Listen, guys, we are wrapping up. Thank you for going the extra mile with us this evening. I'm sure you were glad you did. You know who we are. Get in the game. You can catch us here live every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. We do have a special show coming up this Saturday at 5 p.m., so tune in for that. And don't forget, in the month of May, we are acknowledging mothers of professional athletes, so you are definitely not going to want to miss the lineup for that. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. My account's at Bunch of Legs, LEGZZ. Maybe I'll tell you that story one day myself. And follow us on Facebook at Cetera Bunch. That's Bunch with an E. Or our 904 Live network page. Thank you so much to my special guest.
Thank you for having me.
The man himself, Mr. Grayson Marshall Jr. and Preston, who joined him here live in the studio. Thank you to our producers, Stefan Petty, Miss Allen, the best momager in the world who couldn't be here this evening, Miss Melinda Henry, and my stylist, Barbara J. We love you guys. Don't forget what he said. Take a stand on something and be firm-footed in your stance, for goodness sakes.
Exactly.
We'll have him back sitting on the edge of your seat again soon. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and don't forget, get in the game. Follow us on YouTube. Get in the game with Cetera J. See you guys on Saturday. Have a good night.
Thanks.